Hello and welcome to another episode of Cyber Houston series. You can learn more about our mission, resources, and upcoming events at cyberhouston.org. And today we have an amazing topic, so let me pass the microphone to mi amigo John Volanti. John, take
Thanks,
us.
Andy. Yeah, really excited today to talk about Project Glasswing, Claude Mythos. And you might be wondering, what are these things and why is it relevant based on the progression of the talks that we've had? Well, the most recent talk we had, Andy kind of spearheaded it, and we dealt with vulnerability management and the importance of vulnerability management. And since then, I've read the 2026 Verizon Data Breach and Investigation Report and I was a bit shocked, actually, to learn that the most effective initial attack vector based on Verizon's research of real world breaches is the exploitation of vulnerabilities, a very natural extension of what we talked about last time. In fact, 31% of initial access, the attack vector was the exploitation of a vulnerability. Mythos and Project Glasswing deals with the use of AI in the creation of exploits of vulnerabilities. So it can find vulnerabilities at machine speed, something that we've never done before, and it can understand how to write exploit code automatically to prosecute those vulnerabilities. It's kind of scary. And if you look at some of the stats, and this was released, I want to say in April of 2026 by Anthropic. It was just a natural evolution of some of their other language models. They're trying to enable developers to write the best code possible. And then they ended up arriving at a new language model that could find vulnerabilities and then write exploit code. So really kind of interesting. If you write software, if your company writes software, it'd be interesting to be part of Project Glasswing so you can find your own vulnerabilities and fix them before you go to market. But for others who don't write software, we consume it. We don't know yet. What does this mean? Our normal patch cycles are heavy. IT struggles to keep up. As other software manufacturers use this new model, Claude Mythos, to find those vulnerabilities at machine speed, are we going to get buried under an avalanche of patches to have to apply? So there's a small number of software manufacturers and other people who write code, like JP Morgan Chase. They have access to Mythos. And so they're using it to find vulnerabilities in their code. Mozilla has it, Cisco, Microsoft, all the big manufacturers. So we're still kind of waiting to see what the impact is to the rest of us. But it's not going to be insignificant. And in my industry, we're heavily regulated, and regulators are showing a very keen interest in how different financial services companies are adapting their threat and vulnerability management programs to deal with an onslaught of potential patches when they already struggle to keep up. So that's kind of the backdrop of our episode today, a little bit on Claude Mythos, a little bit on Project Glasswing. I'll open it up to Pierluigi and Andy for any of their thoughts on what this means to business leaders, to practitioners, as we continue to fight ne'er-do-wells.
Let me take a crack at it. A few thoughts off the top of my head, right? As Mythos can find the vulnerabilities, as you said, it wasn't created for that. It was created for actually making the code better. So AI can probably be used also, whether it's Mythos or another tool, to create the fix just as fast, probably. Problem is that now you have, as you said, millions of fixes, God knows how many, and you're going to be patching. That creates creates a huge change in what we do today for patching. Right? Today, for example, Microsoft has its monthly patch Tuesday. We may end up with a daily patch Tuesday. Who knows? But that's for one thing. I'm not so concerned. Well, at least I know as much about the patching of the vulnerability in terms of creating the patch, but more in terms of and now what? Right? How many times are we going to get to the point where patching becomes not even something you do, on a scheduled basis, but something that your computer is constantly connected to the maker of the software, and they are constantly pushing an update as they have it. How urgent is that? There is also a matter of the urgency, right? Is a vulnerability really so bad and exploitable that it needs to be patched now, or can it wait? Because there's always the kind of, not all vulnerabilities are exploitable, and not all vulnerabilities need to be patched yesterday, but some are. So these are considerations that we'll have to keep in mind as we progress through this and see how it works. There is one part that is near and dear to my industry, that is the vulnerability of perimeter security, right? Because at the end of the day, your PC can be vulnerable to anything you want, but if your perimeter is safe and you're working from an office, maybe you're safe, right? I never say you are, but maybe you are. You're certainly better off that way than if you're working from an airport. However, those devices too have vulnerabilities, right? Now, that is where I would apply at the beginning most of the attention. The door needs to remain locked. And if that means patching your firewalls 10 times a day, that's what you're probably going to have to do somehow. If a vulnerability is found on the firewall, that can expose the entire network. It doesn't matter what you got behind the network. That can expose you to hacks, right? Whether it's ransomware or anything else. So the door needs to be bulletproof, locked, and therefore I think if we do start this, somehow we need to start from the perimeter for those who do have a perimeter, because we live in a world where the perimeter is not necessarily a concept anymore, but there are still many companies that do, right? They have offices and there are 4 perimeters, and they have to be sure that the door isn't open, or that there isn't a vulnerability on their firewall that can allow hackers easy access to their network. That's where I would start focusing the attention at the beginning. Let's make sure that these devices are soundproof and solid, so that the network is protected. Then we can start focusing on the software inside. I'm not advocating not patching inside. I'm saying lock the door first, and then you fix inside.
Well, that's a great observation. And, one of the things that people have historically done is prioritize their efforts based on a CVSS. And what's happening is, with the explosion of discovered vulnerabilities, the government really doesn't have the resources to enrich and put the context behind some of these vulnerabilities to add a legitimate CVSS. And so from a prioritization perspective, I think a lot of organizations are going to need to dig a little bit deeper. Is it on my edge versus the inside? Is it known to be exploitable? Is it not known to be exploitable? Okay. And as a defender, I get really nervous when I start thinking about exploitable vulnerabilities. What that represents to me today is a real risk. But the emerging risk side of that are the vulnerabilities not known to be exploitable, but we know eventually they will be. If you look at the zero-day clock, what you'll see is a progression. The amount of time it takes an attacker to understand what a patch does and reverse engineer it and build an exploit, it's gone from years to months to days to minutes. And if you actually go to zerodayclock.com, in 2026, the estimated mean time to exploit a known vulnerability is -5 hours. So you might be asking yourself, well, how can I have a negative measurement of time? What it tells us is that's the exploitation of a known vulnerability. That means that they're already into the 0 days, and 0 days have gotten that to a negative number. So prioritization is absolutely key, starting with our systems that face the internet. Andy, what are some of the things that pop into your mind when we start thinking about the impact of this?
Yeah, thank you, Sean. So, there's 2 things I think that came to my mind when we started the conversation. The first one, I'm not sure if you guys have heard about, but there is a new concept that marketing, is using, but I feel it's a valid concept, which is called exposure security management. This is something that some companies are pushing to represent what we are discussing, right? The CVSS is kind of like it's still a very valid, point of reference for describing a risk. But Microsoft, CrowdStrike, and others, they have been discussing exposure security management as something that they define with different attack paths depending on the criticality of your infrastructure and what services you may have exposed to validate the level of risk that you may have, which is a totally different way of analyzing vulnerabilities that we have been using, right? So this is kind of a new way that they have been presenting those services, which I feel is very interesting. So to me, they have analysis path, they have choke points. So choke points is when you have multiple vulnerabilities that can be resolved and those impacting multiple devices. So to me, this is a kind of an evolution of the vulnerability management to the next level. So you can start now seeing the whole infrastructure and then analyzing where the real risk may reside based on what you guys are both saying, right? Probably anything that is exposed to the internet, the posture of those devices should represent a higher risk. In the case of Microsoft, I know, for example, that a domain controller will have more risk than, for example, a normal computer. So in the way that they represent the information to you is also having validation on the criticality of the asset. So that's one area. The second area is something that, again, both of you said is we do not have right now something that it will represent like a strong AI framework for people to purchase and validate security, right? So the Microsoft, which is, again, is something that I use a lot for business, so I know a lot of what they do, is they implement the Microsoft Security Benchmark version 2, which has some controls based on things that their cloud infrastructure should have to provide better services. But I don't feel we are keeping up with the requirements of we asking the vendors what are they doing related to AI. Because in the past we talk about defense, we talk about attack, but now we're talking about something totally different, right? So I feel we're starting to see that there's a discrepancy between what we normally will call our information security or how we protect ourselves versus what compliance can provide us to prevent industry across the board. And I don't know how long it will take us to catch up with this technology. I think this technology is going really fast. And I think we're finding all these problems as this technology is kind of changing. And on the security side, on the defender side, we're trying to catch up with what is happening next, which I don't know if you guys remember, but I have never seen this change at this speed. I don't remember. Maybe you guys can tell me I'm wrong, but I have never seen it change this fast.
Well,
nothing,
I think
nothing compares with AI, so it's
I think-
not possible.
I feel like it's exponential too, because it's now velocity and volume in a combination that we've never seen before. And as far as the rate of change, I'll see something that's released 2 days ago. I dig into it and I feel like I'm 2 years behind. So I feel 2 years behind on everything, even though it's only 2 days old or 2 weeks old. It's the rate of change is pretty staggering.
And if you don't mind saying something about this is, and I don't know how much of this you have seen, but we are still talking to a lot of organizations, vendors, that they don't have a secure SDLC. They don't, or they don't have a SecDevOps. A lot of them, they don't. A lot of them, they don't. So imagine now introducing all this massive amount of change to a company that is already immature in the software development lifecycle. This, as a person who purchased software, I'm scared to death because you're saying, how am I going to validate if a vendor is doing enough? I don't have nothing. Oh, they have a SOC 2 Type 2. That's useless about all this. It's like, what do I care? That doesn't represent anything to me right now. They have a PCI DSS. It's still the same. It's like you do not have right now. You're going to have to do your own due diligence almost, or hire someone who knows.
If I may, what we need to focus on is, we cannot mention this, the prioritization of the exploitability, right? How important is this software? What is it doing in your network? Is it exploitable? Is it even exposed to the internet? Right? these are the first things that need to be of concern. Because if a software lives and dies on your workstation and never does anything else, which is rare by all means, but could be, then maybe, whether it's vulnerable or not, it's not even a problem. Right? But obviously,
But Pierluigi, how much software you still know? So the machine that software is moving to SaaS or PaaS type of application.
The real problem is that. Exactly, I was getting there. So we don't even install software. I was making this consideration. I just bought a new computer, a new laptop, and I literally threw away the other one, knowing that there is absolutely nothing, maybe the temporary files, I scrapped those up, that I needed. Nothing. There is no software on the computer because it's all browser. Right? So in reality, I'm not so concerned about maybe the vulnerability of the browser, by all means, that needs to be fixed, right? But other than that, the real problem is the vendors in the cloud.
100%.
They are the ones. But it's good and bad, right? Because this conversation we're having here is tailored usually for business people, business owners, small and medium business owners, who don't necessarily have a security team, and they find themselves with this new problem. They read about it, and oh my God, what is it? This is another hammer on my head. What am I going to do about it? Maybe the problem isn't as bad as it sounds, because the SaaS, hopefully, has enough technical people, security people, and IT people to be able to at least implement a proper patching program to keep up with this new world, right? You would assume that would be the case. Maybe it's not going to be, maybe it's wishful thinking, but at least they are theoretically technical. That's what they do for a living. They're giving you an application. They should have people that understand the conversation we're having and the need for a change in the way they are taking care of their possible vulnerabilities. Maybe they can join the glass. What's the name again? I apologize. You are muted.
It's Project Glasswing.
Glasswing, thank you.
When you started saying glass, I didn't know if you're going to say glass half empty or half full. Because if you were going to call it half full,
I was thinking the same thing.
I was thinking
maybe they can join. You said they can join Project Glasswing. So
I need to say that this is the first time I hear Pierluigi saying this kind of nice things. I don't know what's happening to you. This is a World Cup effect or something like that. But you're being very positive. This is a good change.
But listen, what you're talking about though is this shift to SaaS, and everybody is deep in software as a service.
Yeah.
This now represents a systemic supply chain problem with our third parties.
But
we saw this 5.5 years ago with SolarWinds, right? With Sunburst, and with what happened with SolarWinds. Now, if you do that on a much larger level, we could really face a storm, I guess I'll call it.
The problems you face are a lot worse. However, the possibility that things may be taken care of better is a lot. There is a much higher chance, right?
Yeah, and I think
because they're not in the hands of the end user. They are
one
in
of
the
the things
that.
But they're constrained too. They're constrained just like the rest of us, and they don't have unlimited budgets. They don't have unlimited staffing. And so one of the things I'm thinking of, if I'm a business leader, and what's the impact of Mythos on me, of Glasswing? What does this really mean if I end up with more patching than my IT department can do? Or maybe I outsource the patching and remediation management. Why would you
do that? Why can't you use the same project to actually do the patching? Mythos was created to create patching.
I don't see any tooling or conversations about a high quality agentic AI workflow to better categorize a vulnerability, to understand the severity, to understand the exploitability. And now it's not, if people used to say it's internet facing is exploitable and a novice can exploit it, that's super, super high priority. But now this whole concept of ease of exploit, it's not just can it be exploited, but how easily can it be exploited? Technologies like these language models might eliminate the ease of exploitation to the point where everybody can do it.
Think about, a few minutes ago you said, but today, 2 hours later after I read something, I feel 2 years obsolete.
Yes.
The chances are that while we're talking about this, within a few days, a few months, who knows, there will be the tool that you are talking about, right? It will be, maybe it's
Yes.
already there.
So,
I am
so
optimistic of the fact that we're working in both directions.
he's optimistic. This is amazing. This is a new call. This is a new Pierluigi. So I will tell you this. One of the things that I will
I
tell
drank a
you,
little
yes,
bit before the call, huh?
yeah, you're getting ready for the World Cup finals.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
one of the things I will tell you is that when we implement changes, and this is something I need to say because I have seen over and over again, it doesn't matter that the vendor released the patch. The implementation of that is what takes time because the maintenance windows that the companies define are extremely limited. And then the change management that those changes require a lot of times and the approvals for the patch to be deployed is where all the bottleneck happens. Sometimes it's not about the patch being released. Sometimes it's about the implementation that the company takes.
Which is what the topic of this entire conversation was supposed to be. We kind of deviated in a few directions, but the original conversation was, are we now going to get overwhelmed by all this sheer amount of patches, and how it's going to work out? I mentioned earlier Patch Tuesday, that's once a month. Is it going to end up being once an hour, once a day? We don't know yet, right? We don't know how it will end up.
Well,
Where
Google
we'll
is
go.
doing that. Google is weekly. So now Chrome is updating weekly. So, for example, Google already changed that. It's not once a month, it's weekly. You know that.
But that's because it's a browser and it's easier. Where an entire operating system may not be that easy. That's the real problem.
No.
How easy is it going to
100%.
be to start pushing updates at their rate? Because, for example, every time I update Microsoft, I have to reboot. Do I have to reboot every hour now? That's not going to work, right? So,
Andy, you brought up the
there is a balance
concept
here somewhere.
of maintenance windows. And as we think about options and alternatives, I think security professionals and their counterparts in IT need to set aside time and really have a blank slate conversation and not allow the obstacles that we've placed in front. Like, we literally put obstacles in front of ourselves to slow ourselves down. We need to imagine what really are the alternatives. Let's say we do get into a position where we're happy and confident in our prioritization based on asset criticality, asset location, exploitability of the vulnerability, all these, multi-dimensional attributes that we put into maybe an AI-assisted prioritization capability. Now we've got a nice list. It still could be too much. And you talked about very small maintenance windows. We may indeed, if we can't hire additional resources to do this work, we might need to have bigger maintenance windows. That might be a conversation the business has to have. This is a risk-based type conversation. How much does it cost you to be down if your line of business application isn't functioning properly? What's that cost per minute, per hour, per day, whatever it happens to be? We might need to double the maintenance window.
I fear that if we go in the direction, we'll end up not patching, because the prioritization in the business is always the business, and it's as it needs to be. So if you start saying, I need to take down the system an hour a day every day because I have to do maintenance, somewhere, somehow, somebody will gonna say, that ain't happening because I need to work. And so you end up crushing against the needs of the business, and which is, I mean, it kind of always happens. The security is always in the middle between, do I leave the door open so you can work, or do I lock it up and you can't do anything anymore? Like, it's always compromise. But I feel that if we start taking the approach of either literally taking the systems down every day or every so often, too often, we are going to have to clash against the business people. We can.
I agree with you, Pierluigi, but you know where I think the ball may be is to change the architecture. Because if you have today, in this century, to shut down your operations to patch, maybe the question is, do you have the right architecture?
Yes.
Maybe you need a high availability where you can load balance to a different system, and then you can turn down this one, update, check that is everything okay, and then balance to that one. Something like the chaos engineering. I'm sure that you guys hear about it. So maybe the conversation should be, yes, I understand we cannot shut down these operations. So why don't we start planning to a more, mature architecture where we will be able to do this type of work, because now it's required to be more often, so we do not turn off operations.
Andy, listening to you, I have a vision of a unicorn flying over a rainbow with sunshine everywhere.
Because it costs money.
That's beautiful. No, listen, because what did I say? I said IT and InfoSec has to get together and they have to clean the slate and they have to stop putting those same obstacles in front of them that they always have. And then what I did is I laid out a story where I purposefully put the obstacles in front of me and you saw it and you took that view. That was perfect. That's absolutely
No,
brilliant.
but Pierluigi is right. This costs money. But I will tell you this. My experience is that, as we know, this is a money decision all the time. So risk versus money versus services, you have to put everything in the balance, right? So what is more risky? To have the vulnerability available for people to expose? How much it costs you to have that system down? Because maybe the conversation needs to be about that. The conversation needs to be how much it costs you to have this down. If it costs you too much, then the architecture changes when it makes sense. And today with the cloud, to be honest with you, you can even have like a passive active situation where you're not paying for the use. So you can even say, hey, you know what? I'm going to turn this on, start paying for it, and then do all my patches here, and then transition my services whenever this is done. So there are ways of doing this.
I think you're going to see people who are really strong with Ansible, Chef, Puppet, Terraform, those types of automation tools to spin up a VM, to configure, to harden, and to get it production ready in a very short period of time. Those people are going to become invaluable. We should really be able to treat our servers more as ephemeral. They're serving a need. We spin up its twin that's perfectly patched. We drop this thing down, and there might even be like this ebb and flow of multiple VMs that are in different stages of cleansing themselves, servicing requests versus killing themselves off, to have this little bit of a loop. So even if a machine does get infected, it's going down in 3 minutes.
Let's not forget our audience, though, because these are beautiful conversations for companies that have the money to do them, to implement them, right? But if our audience is a small and medium business, these conversations may be a little bit hard because of the cost.
I agree, but this is a question that you buying software should ask your vendor. So, for example, the question should be, because you're not developing software probably, the question is, okay, tell me how you're offering services. Tell me about your resilient strategy. If you're not having these things in place, you as a vendor.
Well, if you are a SaaS server, I expect this guy, whatever what John said, I expect it to be the case. And I would assume that they're running in the cloud, whether it's private or public, it doesn't matter, in a position where you will never see what they're doing in the background, but they're patching all the time. I'm taking that for granted. If they're not doing that and I find out, I don't want to do business with them. My focus here is on the small and medium guy that has this problem on his own machines, right? And he has maybe a legacy application that runs on a system that needs to be updated. We've done this for 40 years. We know there are a million different, but it's a kaleidoscope of situations, right? And some of them may not even be solvable. Maybe it's time to just move on, throw away the legacy system. Who knows, right? Sometimes that's the only solution. If you want to be safe, just toss the legacy system and get with the program. But the thing is, we cannot have a solution for everybody. However, SaaS does mitigate the impact. But I have also another thought. This is happening now, right? Because we are analyzing and finding vulnerabilities to software that's been written by humans for the past 40 years. And I say 40 because I'm sure there's some software somewhere that's still running there after 40 years, especially in the banking industry. They're still using COBOL somewhere. But this, at some point, will wind down because more and more we're using AI to create new software. Now, I don't know, and I don't want to say the AI software doesn't have vulnerabilities, but it's certainly, hopefully, less prone to vulnerabilities than humans. At least I don't think it's too early to run a study to see if that's true. We'll have to wait a few years for that to be the case. But my thought on this is that as we analyze the current software and we fix it, then the new software is going to come out that's automated, if you will, and it will have either none or less vulnerabilities, and so it will be less of a problem.
That's one thing's for sure. There's a lot more to unpack with Mythos and Project Glasswing and the derived fable than we have in 30 minutes. But some parts of this conversation make me want to start selling cyber insurance. But with that,
Actually, if I
Pierre
have
Louis,
insurance, I may not want to sell it to you anymore because this is really scary.
Pierre Luigi, I'll have you close us out.
Thank you. All right. Today's episode is made possible by our gold sponsor, Reneca Digital. Big thanks to Reneca for their continued support of the channel. Subscribe to the Cyber Houston YouTube channel and join us each month as we explore the topics that matter most to you and your organization. Be sure to follow us on LinkedIn, YouTube, and at cyberhouston.org to stay up to date on the latest episodes and resources. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you. Bye.